So we'll start, as always, with a quick review of the last season. We just came out of meteorological winter here, which ran from December 1st through this year, February 29th. And despite that 1 week in January of cold weather, on average, we did end slightly warmer than normal across all of South Central Texas. For most locations, only about a degree or so warmer than average when all of it shook out and averaged out over those 90 or so days. Less than usual days where temperatures fell below freezing, with less than 10 of them in Del Rio, at Austin, Camp Mabry, and San Antonio. And that's the least we've seen in about 4 years. There was a year with fewer freeze days in the winter of 2019-2020. It was also wet, but most of that rain fell over basically just a 4-day period or so in the January 22nd to 25th time frame. During that time, several locations picked up more than a foot of rain in Fayette County, and you can see on the map here that's where the significant, 2 times the normal rainfall fell across, all of Fayette, much of Gonzales, and then down into DeWitt counties. Much of the northwestern portions of our region saw below normal precipitation, but they're pretty dry in the winter out that way anyway. So there was really only, an inch to 2 inches rainfall deficit this winter out there. In terms of the correlations with El Nino, we did see a common El Nino winter pattern with heavier rains, especially closer to the Gulf Coast and areas to the east of Texas, saw significant El Nino rains. As far as temperatures are concerned, while El Nino winters do typically tend to try to favor below normal temperatures, we're competing in that interannual variability with the long-term warming trend as our climate changes. And so this year, that long-term trend definitely kind of, won out, and we did once again see slightly above normal temperatures across South Central Texas this winter. Looking at some of our, rainfall maps over the past 180 days, which is about 6 months roughly on the top right there, and then the last year here on the bottom left, you can see that only far northern portions of our region, the northern hill country, had above normal rainfall, and then portions of the coastal plains and Austin area, while locations from San Antonio and the rest of the hill country to the west towards the Rio Grande have been rather dry. Looking back over the last year, there was some decent rain down here in Maverick, east or western Dimmitt, and portions of this area. Unfortunately, the rest of our region has been seeing rainfall deficits stack up. So these 50 to 75% of normal areas here over the last year in eastern Kerr, Kendall, into southern Blanco counties, those correspond to about 8 to 12 inch rainfall deficits over the course of the last year. But if we look at the year prior, we had significant deficits there as well in those same regions, and then extending through much of the rest of central portions of our South Central Texas service area. And so those long-term deficits now in many areas exceed 2 feet, and we're seeing that manifest in a lot of different ways. The current drought monitor shows where those longer-term deficits are. The worst D3 drought remains over about 7% of South Central Texas, across much of the hill country and encompassing Medina Lake, which is extremely low. Whereas we've also seen drought re-expand recently in the southern Edwards Plateau and out towards the Rio Grande, where those dry conditions occurred this winter. A lot of improvement where it was wetter, especially in the coastal plains. Significant rainfall surpluses will keep drought at bay there for the next several months. But along I-35 and especially just west of it, the rains that we did see were not enough to make up for those long-term deficits. And most of the impacts of that are in our reservoirs and our rivers and of course the aquifers as well. You can see that 7-day average stream flow from the USGS. This is a couple days old, but it still looks similar. Below normal across most of our river basins in South Central Texas, and on the low side of the near normal category here for, say, the Colorado River Basin, and then Cibolo Creek and a few other smaller river basins. But for the most part, we'll need a lot more rain to start getting those rivers flowing back near their normal levels for spring and as we head into summer. And then in terms of the reservoirs, East Texas saw a lot of improvement over the course of the last 6 months or so. Unfortunately, here in South Central Texas, a lot of the rain has missed the basins for some of our more notable reservoirs. Medina Lake, Lake Amistad, and Canyon Lake are all, right at their lowest on record since those reservoirs were filled, many, many decades ago. Lake Travis and Lake Buchanan have been lower, but those highland lakes are still running extremely low at this time. And, we'll, like I said, need a lot of rain to really make up for those long-term deficits in much of the hill country and then westward towards the Rio Grande. Shifting away from sort of the past weather and looking ahead, we'll start with some spring climatology. And many of you have seen this graph before. I show it every time, but it's really important, especially in the spring, to note, it's our primary severe weather season. We see, basically more than 10 times the hail reports in South Central Texas during each month of spring than we do during any other month of the year. As we head through the spring, especially once we get towards late April and May, we also see our flash flood reports increase significantly, so that we're heading into our wetter season. And you can see that here on the graphic on the right. This shows the average temperatures, both daily high, low, and daily average, and then monthly average precipitation is the bars. So May is the wettest month of the year for all three of our main climate cities of Austin, Del Rio, and San Antonio, and that of course then corresponds to the higher instance there of flash flooding in May. Again, we'll also have to be keeping a close eye on all kinds of severe weather. They can happen at any time of year in South Central Texas, but they are favored in the March through May timeframe that we are now entering. Taking a quick look at the status of El Nino, or the El Nino Southern Oscillation. So we were in a strong, pretty much nearly a super El Nino, but surface waters are starting to cool in portions of the eastern equatorial Pacific. You can see this forecasted downward trend in that anomaly, and we are expected now to enter a La Nina once again as we head into next fall and winter. I'll talk a little bit more later in this presentation about what that may mean for us. There's at least a 76% chance by fall right now, and I would imagine that when this is updated next week, that percentage will likely go up. In the near term here, the impacts of El Nino may not be entirely over for us. We will see warmer than normal temperatures favored towards the 13th through the 17th, but there are some signals that cooler and wetter weather may be coming as we head through the middle portion of March, with below normal temperatures now favored for the 15th through the 21st, and at least a 40 to 50% chance of wetter than normal conditions during this 13th through the 21st period. I'll look a little bit here at the status of our drought over a longer term. So this is basically the amount of our coverage area of the 33 counties that we cover that have been in each stage of drought dating back to late 2018. So this shows basically our current drought really ramped up towards the latter portion of 2021, and then went into overdrive in the hot summer of 2022. I'll show a few things here. Let me back up a little. Starting back in 2020 was the beginning of 3 straight La Nina winters, and so I've pointed that out with a marker here. And so you can see that warmer and drier than normal conditions that are favored in South Central Texas during La Nina winters started to impact our region. Drought built, but we had a very wet spring in 2021, and that led to a much milder and drought-free summer in South Central Texas that now feels like a distant memory. 2022, obviously, we saw extreme and exceptional drought expand across the vast majority of South Central Texas before seeing some decent rains, in part due to a tropical system in the late summer of 2022. But drought never really left us, and again strengthened in 2023 as we saw another extremely hot summer. At current, we are in the longest streak of at least some portion of our region being in D3, that's extreme drought or worse. That streak dates back to early 2022, and within about 3 or 4 months, we'll be knocking on the doorstep of the longest streak on record, which runs from September 11th of 2012 to May 12th of 2015. The drought monitor has only been in existence since the year 2000, so it's not a super long data set we're working off of, but still pretty impressive and obvious that those low water levels are a result of these long-term rainfall deficits. So let's look ahead a little bit here. The monthly temperature outlook for the month of March, which we're already a week into, has equal chances. That's essentially saying 33% chance each of below normal, near normal, or above normal temperatures once we get to the end of the month. I also want to point out that areas that are already climatologically dry near the Rio Grande are favored for below normal precipitation through the end of the month. And that's, in addition to their already ongoing, rainfall deficits from this winter. So we would expect to see areas, that are already, not already in drought, see drought expand. In terms of the seasonal outlook for the whole 3-month period through the end of May, officially, we're saying equal chances in terms of temperature for that. And then similarly, a slight lean just in our western areas for below normal precipitation, especially in Valverde County where those odds increase to 40 to 50%. But looking at some of the multi-model ensembles, the North American multi-model ensemble, starting to show some trends towards the potential of warmer weather. And I have only shown the 3-month average here, but looking at individual months, the ensemble average really favors warmer weather than average in May when we're already seeing those normals climb. So this may mean an early start once again to our extreme heat season. No guarantees, of course, as always with long-range forecasting. Should some above normal rainfall materialize, that could help us keep things cooler in the late part of the spring and the early summer. But certainly something to be aware of, that we could again be looking at potential heat health risks early in the season this year. Looking at precipitation, that multi-model kind of agrees more closely with CPC here in a lean towards drier than normal conditions over especially western portions of south central Texas this spring. We'll start to lose the influence of El Niño over the course of the next couple of months and move into our summer subtropical high pressure, as we get out of May and into June. But we'll keep a close eye on things. But at least at this time, all of these things add up to say that where there isn't currently drought in western portions of south central Texas, we're likely to see drought redevelop. And it may also, worsen in some locations, especially in western portions of south central Texas, where those drier than normal conditions are favored. East of where drought currently exists, they've had quite a bit of rain and are pretty unlikely to see a drought redevelop, at least through the end of May. In terms of soil moistures, I've shown here both deep layer soil moistures down to 2 meters on the left and shallow soil moistures on the right. Those shallow soil moistures are much drier over a greater portion of south central Texas, but those are more susceptible to quick changes when we see rain events. So that this may change over the course of the next week or two, depending on how the middle portion of March plays out. Those deeper soil moistures being so dry can be concerning for areas that are agriculturally active. That's not necessarily the case of all of these locations, but those dry soils may have some impact, and will continue to lead to those lower stream flows as the soils soak up extra rain. Looking at 4 different regions of the fire weather outlook portion of this talk. This is from the Texas A&M Forest Service, showing the energy release component over the Western Hill Country, Eastern Hill Country, Central Texas, and South Texas. And they all are near normal for this time of year, but forecast to increase at least over the course of the next week or so. At least right now, no significant fire weather concerns. Out west, where it's been so dry, there hasn't been sufficient green up to provide those fuels this spring. And in our eastern areas, it's been very wet. So at least as of right now, there's no immediate concerns for significant fire potential. However, it is spring, and we will still see dry cold fronts move through. We will still see periods of near critical to critical fire weather, and that could increase later this year, dependent on how spring plays out in terms of our temperatures and precipitation. But again, in the short term, no significant fire weather impacts are expected. These are the longer range fire outlooks and from the National Interagency Coordination Center. I do have these linked here for folks that may be interested in looking at them when they update. I will have these links available in the slides, which I'll send out along with a recording of this presentation here later this evening. But for now, near normal wildland fire potential is favored all the way through April, May, and even June, which I haven't shown here. But these are reissued every month, and of course, things can always change. So we always recommend folks, that have interests in these areas, pay close attention to these products when new updates come out. And then lastly, I do want to touch on later this year. Should La Nina conditions develop, which looks pretty darn likely at this point, it would increase the chances of above normal activity during the Atlantic Basin hurricane season. This doesn't guarantee any Texas landfalling events, but it could increase our risk and will definitely lead to us, wanting to have some heightened awareness once we get into our tropical season late this summer and then into the fall. It could also, increase the chances of a return to that warmer and drier than normal winter pattern that La Nina winters have brought here historically, which if we can't get some good rains this spring through the fall would be, putting us in some pretty dire shape in terms of, being able to make up those current long-standing rainfall deficits. So I'll wrap up here. This is sort of my look at some of the main weather hazards over the course of the next few months. Drought clearly still with us, and for those long-term impacts, those will continue to be above normal. At least in the short term, there haven't been too many impacts in that area recently, but that could change if we are to remain dry, especially again in those western portions of our area. As we get into the spring, it is later in the spring is one of our primary flash flooding seasons, so we'll be watching out for that. But it does take quite a bit to get those rivers running heavily again. So we're calling for a near normal river flood outlook for this spring. Severe weather, again, we're heading into our regular severe weather season. It will happen in portions of South Central Texas between now and the end of May. And fire weather, right now, not really much concern. That could change later this year. At least as of right now, there's no clear signs for that. And I'll mention one last time, at the end of spring, beginning of summer, we will definitely be ramping up into our extreme heat season. So I'll wrap things up here. Again, if you have any questions, you can enter them in the chat box now, or you can always reach me at my email, keith.white@noaa.gov. Again, thank you all for joining me today for this outlook, and I'll stick around here for a couple of minutes in case there's any questions.